Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you this morning?
Doing fine.
Good. All right.
You know, I woke up this morning, Daniel, and rushed to the computer and the television because there was a war going to start today. Yeah. This is it. This was the big day. But it looked like a lot of people didn't believe that.
Yeah.
A few days ago, though, the Ukrainians were preparing, the markets were preparing for it, and that there would be an invasion. They said so, and they're a bunch of old-fashioned communists that really run that country. So the Russians were going to invade. But guess what? It was rather calm. You know, the markets are down, but they've been down for other reasons. And gold was up, but gold was up for other reasons too. Although it got a big boost before before all the excitement of the plans for the war. But it looks like the plans faded. I wonder if Putin chickened out.
Yeah, that's what they'll say.
He just chickened out. But you know, this is something that you wonder, how does that happen, the build up? It's sort of the orchestration of the propaganda, because it wasn't just the United States. They have to have their NATO buddies, doing what we want them to do, and they were, joining in on the course. So, but when the dust settles, and it's trying to settle right now, at least the tanks aren't rolling, and Putin says he's taking his tanks home, which he may or may not be. But if it remains this way and continues to improve, and there is no fireworks, at least for now, who benefited from this exercise? Somebody. It didn't happen out of thin air. It wasn't like when a hurricane hits the Gulf Coast. We don't have much to say about that. But these events, and even the complications from COVID, they just don't come out of the sky. They come by bad policy, and sometimes it's just ignorance, and sometimes it's deliberate activity by bad people. But it turns out that a lot of money was spent, a lot of anxiety, a lot of overreaction, and a lot of loss of credibility. Because even if everything goes as they want, I think under these events, governments, and this is an advantage for us, governments lose credibility. And I would think it'd be interesting to postulate who really benefited the most. I happen to think that if you think of it in a negative way, I think our world leaders, especially with Biden being our leader, that the United States didn't do well.
No.
I think they've slipped. But in some ways, whether they slipped because of a failed COVID policy that it's discovered is mostly the government's fault, or this policy here, it was unnecessary. That's a point for our side of saying, why are we there? Why are we intervening in this country that I don't imagine 1 out of 10 Americans know where Ukraine is?
Yeah. Well, the winners and losers is a good way of thinking about it, because as you say, oh my gosh, it didn't happen. What are we going to do now? I would say the losers, one of the big losers is the U.S. mainstream media, which again, even though they attack us and Zero Hedge and everyone else as being misinformation spreaders, they're the biggest misinformation spreaders of all, and they're the big losers. This is something funny that came out, because they're going to try to sell it, like you said, Dr. Paul, oh, we faced them down and they backed off.
Right.
But this is funny from Biden's speech yesterday, and I actually did watch it. Thankfully, it was short. But he's going on about how we have to stand up to these Russians, and we got to stand up for our allies. We're not going to send troops. We're going to stand up. This line really stuck out at me, Dr. Paul. He says, for all of us standing up for Ukraine, I will not pretend this will be painless. There could be impact on our energy prices. So we're taking active steps to alleviate the pressure on our energy markets, et cetera, et cetera. It sounds to me like he's trying to hide the gas prices going through the roof on we're standing up for Russia. So if you're ticked off like I am because I got to go get gas when we finish the show and I'm having a panic attack over how much it's going to cost, well, that just means you're for Russia because we got to stand up to them.
Yeah, but I think Russia has benefited economically tremendously from this. It's all an argument about sanctions and all, and mocking Russia. Boy, we stuck it to them.
Yeah.
And Putin doesn't seem to be too worried about it. And I think that he's benefited tremendously. They have a lot of oil and gas, and no matter what they do to try to break up any relationship between Russia and the Europeans, it doesn't make any economic sense.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be there. But Russia depends on the price of oil and gas. And all of a sudden, I think they accomplished it, and yet we pretend we have the worst position on energy. We say, well, we're the great producers, and not too many years ago, we were producing for all kinds of reasons, and we had a flood of energy, and the prices didn't soar.
Yeah.
Of course, prices soar for more than the reasons of foreign policy. They soar because of inflationary policy by the Fed. But anyway, the Russians, I think, have benefited tremendously. They're a richer nation for it, and they're coming out, and then they just slowly say, we're backing off this nonsense. And then they sort of laughs at our media.
Yeah.
Oh, you fell for it, didn't you?
Yeah.
If that's their plan. But that doesn't mean we should dismiss anything and everything they say, but we shouldn't overreact either.
That is a funny point, because everything we say, we want to stick it to the Russians. We want to hurt them. All the policies that are done in Washington are helping them, making them richer.
Yeah.
Let's look at a couple of funny clips, though. And this is from Bernard at Moon of Alabama, which I think is a site I highly recommend. Happy Russia Invasion Day. He says, I woke up early today because the moon is full and I've been promised a Russian invasion. The sky was clouded, no moon to see, and the invasion is for some reason way less bloody than anticipated. And he's showing a map from The Sun, which is a UK paper, telling us exactly how it's going to go down, et cetera, et cetera. Well, let's go to the next one, because this is Paul Joseph Watson. There's a really good quote in here. This is what we're getting this morning. Ukraine ally says Russian attack now highly unlikely. And Paul Joseph Watson says the legacy media got it wrong again. And this quote was buried in this, which is, I think, is fascinating. If we can go to the next clip. This is an official, a Ukrainian government official. He's the head of the Servant of the People faction in Kiev's parliament. He played down, this is David Arakamia, played down the chances of a Russian incursion. Now listen to this and compare it with what we were hearing from the U.S. media all the time. This is a top Ukrainian official. During the escalation in the spring of 2021, last year, 220,000 Russian soldiers and equipment were concentrated around Ukraine's borders. Theoretically enough for a major attack, he explained. Now Russia has 123,000, which is almost half the number at the Ukrainian frontier. From a military point of view, he says, as they have explained to us all, a full-scale attack is impossible. Our intelligence does not see the signs that the Russians are directly preparing. That says a lot of things in there. First of all, what you'll never hear in the media is there were twice as many Russian troops there last year when they were again blowing the whistle that it's coming. So there's only half as many. And second of all, that 120,000, according to the head of the Ukrainian party, and they should know they're right next door, that's nowhere near enough to get the job done anyway. So that's why the Ukrainians never believed an attack was coming. This isn't entirely the product of the U.S. White House. It's the product of the UK government, and it's the product of an obedient media that always does what they're told.
You know, when there's a good economic report, whether it's a true report or not, because most economic reports are fudged and to mislead the people. So when that happens, though, and a good report comes out, say on unemployment, the president, most presidents do it, especially Biden, he jumps up, victory, victory, look what I did. I did it. Full employment's on its way, and we have a plan to get rid of the inflation. But under these circumstances, I imagine Biden will continue to say, our policies are working. We confronted them and they backed down.
Yeah.
And I'll bet that will really humble Putin. He'll say, "Oh boy, I better be careful," you know. And it might be that Putin is one step ahead of him.
Yeah. Well, let's look at some of these media headlines, though. I mean, I just grabbed this from one tweet, and I should have given the guy credit, and I didn't. I apologize. But he put up a lot of these incendiary headlines. This is from yesterday. Dawn raid. Russia set to invade Ukraine at 1 a.m. tomorrow with massive missile blitz and 200,000 troops, U.S. intelligence claims. The next one, this is the Mirror. Russian invasion of Ukraine set for 3 a.m. today with missiles and tank attack. The next one, this is The Guardian, which is a nightmare newspaper. It used to be really good. Russia will launch an attack on Ukraine early on Wednesday morning, according to U.S. officials quoted in media reports. And do another one. This is, I can't see what this one is. Russia will order invasion of Ukraine at 3 a.m. tomorrow, sources say. They all have the exact same headlines. None of these stenographers bothered to question what they're being force-fed, not even force-fed, they're happily consuming. And this is why it's funny, and this is why, as you said earlier, the Russians are laughing. This is the spokesperson for the Russian government. Put this next one up. This is on TASS. They know how to troll very well. If we can put up that next one, that next clip. This is from TASS. She says, "When's our upcoming invasions? I'd like to plan my vacation." Diplomat mocks U.S.-UK media. She's very clever woman. So she's saying, can you give us a list, a schedule of when the invasions are going to happen this year? Because I want to make sure I can plan my vacation around
You know, they must be watching our show, because every once in a while we make a statement saying, you know, if you make fun of these people, it's a lot better than just trying to be so serious and lecture them that they're going to change. Just sort of laugh at them with a guarded effort to make sure that you don't overstep your bounds. But no, I think that the real people that were at threat are the people who pay for this, the people who would have to fight if it's there. And this is delightful that they're backing off. And of course, we have seen, you know, when this excitement was building up, oil was way up and gold was way up, and they're still both quite high. And so it means that there is some danger there, but you have to sort it out. Just like I worked at trying to sort out, you know, economic events that are secondary to COVID versus secondary to the Fed. The Fed's always involved. And in this case, you try to sort out what the Fed is doing and what our foreign policies are doing. And they are connected because the financing of the wars come from the Fed. So they're a participant. And right now, you know, they're sort of in limbo. But I think the markets tell me, with the oil and gas prices, that the Fed is still up to a lot of mischief. They have no idea what they're doing, and that the spending is going to continue. And you know, it's not likely in the next week or two, I don't know about a month or two or a year or two, exactly what our administration will look like. But right now, you know, people are saying there's going to be no magic, you know, with this administration. Some people say, well, you know, maybe he'll resign, maybe our president will resign. Oh, that might help. We'll get that vice president. She looks pretty good.
She's smart. Well, the one other thing that I was going to mention that I hadn't, someone that's going to benefit are government contractors, and they always benefit. I was reading an article yesterday about how, you know, we ran away from the embassy in Ukraine and Kiev. We ran out to Lviv, having a heart attack that we're going to be invaded. But they didn't just run out and lock the doors. They smashed every bit of the computers. They smashed all the equipment. They destroyed all the hard drives. So there's going to be a government contractor out there that is right now just going, this is fantastic. I'm going to remodel my 5th bathroom based on this. But we want to do the next clip because this is the Senate and the House. Bipartisanship, you talked about it yesterday, and that's why I saw this. Of course, a day late and a dollar short. Let's put up that next clip of Chuck Schumer and our favorite senator from, our second favorite senator from Kentucky, Mitch McConnell. Bipartisan group of Senate leaders issues a message of solidarity with Ukraine.
You know, this is a little bit different than the policy I advocate. You know, I like people to get along together, so there's less likely to have war. But this is also the one thing that I generally have tried to warn about. There's a big difference between coalitions working on an issue where neither side gives up anything they believe in. And for instance, progressives and libertarians and conservatives can come together. And even now, in spite of how well they've controlled the media on this, there's been evidence that there's the good conservatives, there's the libertarians, and there's a few progressives left. And they need to come together. We need a lot more of it. And I think that's important, rather than saying, you know what we need on this budget, we need to do something about this. Somebody wants it to be $100 billion, and somebody said, well, and on a policy of building a weapon we absolutely don't need. So the correct policy is don't build it.
Yeah.
So no, they get together and they say, Well, we'll compromise and let's just spend $75 million. We only will have that. So we'll have the weapon, we'll have the jobs and all this, and we're going to save this money. So it's not a compromise, it's a sellout. And that's what I see there.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will say, I just wonder though, nobody's done a good study on this, I wonder how many people get fooled by this bipartisanship. I wonder if they feel better. But I would think the people are wiser now than they have been when things are more calm. They'd look at this and say, they're all fake.
Yeah.
At least the people we know from our website. I don't think they get bought into this.
Well, nothing brings the parties together more than the threat of war, right? They both agree. And here's a quote from that article. Talk about a day late and a dollar short. This is funny because they were all expecting the invasion because they believe the stupid media. Said, this is the joint statement between the Republicans and Democrats in the Senate. In this dark hour, we are sending a bipartisan message of solidarity and resolve to the people of Ukraine and an equally clear warning to Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin. It's so dramatic and ridiculous.
Yeah, they're going to get together and bipartisan put on more sanctions, which is a major problem because it's an attack, really, and it's a violation of decency if you use these, without precise reasons to use them, but they're never, I don't think, of much benefit. And the members of Congress, the House and the Senate, the Senate is more bipartisan, but this whole thing is bipartisan.
Yeah.
The House is coming together, and the leadership on the House side has always been very bipartisan, which means that, there's an agreement up here, and only a screwball like a libertarian here and there disagrees. So therefore, they're completely wrong, and they get together and they say, we'll put on more sanctions.
Yeah, that'll do it.
What did Biden say? I think he said something about, no, I'm not going to say it. He just shouted out, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't give a darn about what you do. It doesn't matter. And then he's back to thinking, the dollars and rubles that he's sticking in his pocket by selling more oil at a much higher price.
Well, let's move on to a couple of updates if we're ready on the COVID thing. And this is an article thanks to Jeff Tucker, who, again, we named as one of the heroes who's done a great job writing over the past couple of years. And the article is from the Brownstone Institute and is titled, Are They Finally Admitting Natural Immunity? And what he writes about is a CDC put out a report with a chart in it. And let's put up that chart because charts are helpful. This is the first time you'll see this because even Fauci, remember he said, I have no idea, I've never heard of natural immunity. This is a chart on laboratory confirmed COVID-19 associated hospitalizations among immunologic cohorts defined by vaccination and previous diagnosis histories. It's a long way of saying that line on the bottom, that black dotted line that is basically at 0, those are the people who are unvaccinated and have had a previous COVID-19 diagnosis. That means the people that have gotten natural immunity from having and gotten over the virus are the least likely of all groups to end up in the hospital. And this is the CDC itself. This is not some rebel group. So this is why Jeff Tucker wrote about it.
But you can find something that came out of the CDC either today, yesterday, or the day before that contradicts, something that is seemed to be understanding about natural immunity. But and then they work on the assumption that their vaccines keep working. We really don't need to do this because there's not as much Omicron anymore, and it has helped. Always blame the wrong thing and take credit for it.
Yes.
But the little note I wrote to myself here is all this fuss, 2 years of this, punishing doctors for just suggesting it, that we should have a debate, that you should practice medicine, listen to your patient, you get penalized, you can lose your jobs and lose your financing. And yet this is something that could have been solved and totally prevented by one principle: apply free market principles to the practice of medicine.
Yeah.
And that would be it. Instead of the government. Of course, when this all started, I remember very clearly, when it really accelerated where the government would take over medicine. Matter of fact, when I got out of medical school in 1961, there was no Medicare or Medicaid, and I worked emergency rooms and all, and I didn't know there was a problem.
Yeah.
But they, now it's, I don't know how anybody can avoid the government when they get medical care. If you go to the hospital, the government really finances the hospitals too,
Yeah.
so they either obey or not, and you have to set a good standard. So you will wear your mask,
Yeah.
and you will not be allowed to use anything alternative other than a vaccine. Bring them
Yeah.
in, give them a vaccine shot, but they certainly can't use alternative medications.
And just imagine when you look at that line and you see the people that are least likely to end up in the hospital are the ones that have had it and gotten over it. Just imagine if when the Great Barrington Declaration came out, if they had followed those examples set by these very, very prominent, eminent doctors, rather than what they did, which let's not forget, the head of the NIH, Francis Collins, he sent an email to Fauci saying, hey, there's some kooks, here's some fringe scientists talking about this immunity stuff. Let's figure out how we can discredit them. Let's go, let's try to contact our journalists. Instead of trying to destroy these alternative voices who actually turned out to be the right voices, if they had looked at it and had a debate about it and talked about it and adopted some of these principles, imagine how many lives would have been saved and all of the other things that are associated with the lockdowns.
Just think if they had followed one free market principle that when you're manufacturing drugs, that shouldn't be with taxpayers' money.
Yeah.
And if you are working in a free market, you're responsible. If you sort of hide the facts and they could be dangerous and they they really are, and people have complications. Look at the stories now; they make me sick thinking about how many young people, especially, where they say all the teenagers, all the kids have to have this, and they're the last ones to be released of their burden of the mask going on, and it's all in the name of taking care of the kids. So, the market can solve a lot of problems. People say that's anarchy, it's chaos, and there is a little bit of disturbance. Everything is not perfect because life is not perfect. But I'll tell you what, if a smaller group that working in voluntary way with doctors and investigators are all private and not controlled by the money that they're going to make in the pharmaceuticals that they make, I tell you what, there'd be some problem. But nothing what compare it to when one individual has too much power and starts writing regulations and not responsible to anybody. And I can't think of anybody any name would come to mind.
Yeah.
I mean, just the way the CDC has been run, and no liability, money is in. We have another clip here where we're talking about that's when they were caught talking about money, and so it's no farce. It's the people I think are waking up. But it's so tedious. But even here among this, people, the bad stuff, they look at it, that means maybe every single day they read this and they say, you know what, this is out of control. I've seen some good talks on the internet, spontaneous people going out and speaking out.
Yeah.
And they're not only the white physicians. There's a lot of minorities that this is a real unifier when it comes to bringing people together. Freedom brings people together. That's what my contention is. And yet, what do? We reject it outright.
Yeah.
And then we wonder why we have problems.
Well, you mentioned a little bit about money, and let's move to this next segment because this is something, no wonder they want to cancel Project Veritas. They go undercover and they get people to admit the truth, which is it's treason, right, as you say. Here's an undercover investigation. This is an FDA executive officer, Christopher Cole. He was caught in an undercover camera by Project Veritas, and he says he expects the FDA to announce annual COVID-19 vaccinations. It's going to become official policy. He says this will give us a recurring fountain of revenue. and he talks about how the vax makers and the pharmaceutical industry give millions of dollars to the FDA every year. So this relationship between the two is really, talk about insidious, talk about incestuous. No wonder we're getting the worst of all worlds. This is the opposite of what you're calling for, Dr. Paul, of a free market in medicine.
Those are the exact words that he said, quoting. It'll be reoccurring fountain of revenue.
Fountain of revenue.
Cole said in the hidden camera footage. Quote again, it might not be that much initially, but it's recurring. It'll continue if they can get every person required on an annual vaccine. That is a recurring return of money going into our company.
Jeez. And this is the FDA. I mean, this is supposedly a pseudo government agency. They've privatized their profits and socialized their losses.
They would be more careful if they have a vague understanding about a higher law. There is a higher law that is superior to anything that they produce or manipulate what we have by the politicians. But it's obvious he has no idea what morality is all about.
Yeah, good for Veritas. These guys are real heroes. Well, I was looking at this and I was thinking, who I haven't seen about a lot lately is Fauci. And so I did a little search. There's not a lot out there, but I just want to throw this up really quick because I think you might get a bit of a grin over it. This is the Daily Mail, which is great. Yeah, that's it, Tony. Dr. Fauci claims that the easing of COVID mandates by blue states has, quote, nothing to do with politics, and they're only, quote, following the science. All right, Fauci, thanks very much. I know you'd like that. Our last little story is from Dan Horowitz, who writes over at The Blaze, and he's also, we should name him as one of the great writers of this past 2 years. He's done such a terrific job, challenging fearlessly. I'm surprised he hasn't been canceled. But here's some great news, and I sent it over to you yesterday saying, we could do a good news story today. This
right.
is great. The New Hampshire House Committee has unanimously passed a bill affirming physicians' right to prescribe off-label medications.
Wow, just another tinge of liberty being returned to
Yeah.
us. And I liked what you did when you talked about Fauci, because you did what I suggest is a good idea. Just sort of smile and know, it's a joke what they're all about. I think that's the best thing you do when you don't want to fight and fume with them, because that won't work anyway. But chuckling a little bit and just laughing at them is a way of calling attention. But no, this is good news. New Hampshire has this, and they have another. This had to do with it was in generalities, but they have one that is going to be specific for ivermectin.
Yeah.
And so maybe that freedom movement where it was encouraged that a few liberty-loving people would move to New Hampshire. Maybe
that's helping. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be.
Could be.
Ideas have consequences.
Well, I like what Dan Horowitz wrote in his first line because it is sort of funny. He says, if the federal government can hand out crack pipes like candy, then shouldn't citizens be able to access ivermectin?
Do you know they said that was one of the most positive things that they said that changed people's mind? Well, it is. It's common sense. Why would they do this? But there's so much our government does that contradicts themselves.
Yeah, well, I'll just close by thanking our viewers again. And I don't talk about it very often, but the Ron Paul Institute is a nonprofit that is responsible for the Ron Paul Liberty Report. If you want to go to ronpaulinstitute.org, find a lot of great articles, not too many, but a few each day that are good to read. If you feel like making a tax-deductible donation to help us keep the show on the road, so to speak, we certainly appreciate that as well, and we thank you for your support and for your ongoing support.
Very good. And I'm going to close by just emphasizing once again about the New Hampshire law and the movement up there, because there will be, winners and losers. The people will win. The individuals, free market medicine gets a little boost. And the people who should be and could very well lose if this momentum continues, that's the pharmaceutical industry. And I'll tell you what, when you think about what Robert Kennedy has done to make this point, I'll tell you what, a lot of people have awakened on this. And this should bring people together. Liberty shouldn't divide us, because an honest Democrat, liberal, just a social economic liberal, or a progressive, or a libertarian, or a constitutionalist, They should all appeal to this, to let people make their own decision and come together on this, especially this anti-corporatism. And I'll tell you what, the more I studied and look at everything the Fed has done, they lead the charge, and they're more powerful than I ever dreamed they were. And they do have a control because they pass out the funds, and they are social. They have a strong social agenda, and it's not for liberty and private property. It's for protecting their interests, protecting the interests of pharmaceutical companies, and protecting the interests of those who make a lot of money off radical environmentalism. So the information is out there, the tools are there. So when we see somebody getting together and passing a law like they do in New Hampshire, that needs to spread too, just like the truck convoy is spreading and more people are interested in it. People need to wake up and take a stand. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.